Thank you. Happy Sabbath, everyone. Are your toes warm? Mine just barely are. Welcome to anyone on the webcast. I heard lots of congregations are out today, so welcome to Cincinnati East as well. Complaining is contagious, wouldn't you say? It spreads like wildfire. Isn't it easier to, someone says, what about this right here? And it's easier to say, yeah, I agree. And you sort of, wallow in the mire with the person for a while. Complaining is contagious. It's easy to complain when, someone else starts and opens the door. The internet, if you've read the comments to pretty much any website, it's just like a cesspool of complainers. If you can help it, don't read all the comments on any news article you read. It's easy when things don't go our way to, complain or grumble. Do you know any complainers? Are you a complainer? As Christians, what is expected of us? Let's go over to the book of Philippians, Philippians 2. Philippians 2. And in verse 14 it says, "Do all things without complaining and disputing." Well, that doesn't leave a lot of room. Doesn't leave a lot of room for complaining. All things? In the sense, the word here for complaining, some translations you may have in your lap say murmur or grumble. Sort of that, under your breath, just like, I can't believe this is happening to me. That complaining, grumbling you do under your breath. And when things don't go our way, it's easy to turn to that, isn't it? Now, sometimes we may have a legitimate complaint, I just bought some gloves from Amazon. Amazon, if you're watching, you will be getting some gloves back this week. They're already ripped. But, they are sometimes a legitimate thing, but I didn't, under my breath, grumble about, I can't believe I bought these gloves and they're not working and broken already. There are times that we legitimately have complaints, but this is talking about sort of this under your breath, just sort of disdain for whatever situation you're in. And I don't know about you, but it feels really good to just gripe about something, doesn't it? Just feels good. Just get this off my chest. Just going to talk about it. But the problem is it doesn't really help anything. Grumbling, complaining this way. Doesn't really help anything. Doesn't help a situation. It doesn't help sort of if we have a dispute with a person either, does it? In fact, it can do damage. It can hurt us. It can hurt anyone who hears us grumbling about something. Verse 15 of Philippians 2, that you may become blameless and harmless. So do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Among a generation of complainers and grumblers and gripers, we are to be different. We're supposed to be lights. When you hear someone else grumbling, what is your take on them? Us, as Christians, complaining and grumbling is an attitude issue. And here, as being lights in the world, it's also a reputation issue. We're supposed to be lights, not complaining and not disputing, as it says here, with other folks, not fighting with one another. But let's stay with the grumbling part. We label ourselves as Christians. We put the name, we have Christian, we're the church of God. We have God's name in our church. And we label ourselves that way. And, when we are seen as sort of the grumbling, complaining type of people, it says a little bit about us, doesn't it? People will see us and they'll see our Christianity and they'll make a judgment based on our reputation. I think that could be a very big side effect if we find ourselves to becoming grumblers. God, in his wisdom, inspired Paul to write this, that in all things we shouldn't be murmuring. You know, and he wrote this from prison, which is always interesting. What about personally? Personally, what are the effects of grumbling that can happen to us personally? I read this article on Psychology Today. I don't know the reputation of Psychology Today, but I thought the comment was sound in its common sense factor, so let me read what it says. The problem is that today we associate the act of complaining with venting far more than we do with problem solving. As a result, we complain simply to get things off our chest, not to resolve problems or create change, rendering the vast majority of our complaints completely ineffective. When we grumble, that's basically what we're doing. It's not fruitful. It doesn't really accomplish anything. It just kind of feels good, doesn't it? Remember the connotation of the word here. It's that under your breath that's just sort of like angry, grumbly, murmuring. Even the sound of the word murmur just tells you, what that sort of attitude is. The article also says, all it takes to turn pointless whining into complaints that solve problems and create change is to learn the tools and techniques to complain effectively. So, just like I said, Amazon, you will be getting some gloves back in the mail this week. What are things that we complain about? Well, when things are, for us in our modern world, when things don't go our way, when things are, slightly more inconvenient for us, isn't that when we start to grumble or murmur? What about when we have to do something and we don't see the benefits? I'm guilty a couple times when Judy makes a slightly larger salad than I was wanting for dinner, or soup. Not the biggest soup fan. But I try not to grumble. I try not to complain, because I know a large salad might be better for me, or a soup might be better for me. I read this one article this week about, sometimes we might grumble and we might have something that we're struggling or grappling with God about. And it says that a lot of times we find ourselves in a state of grumbling or murmuring when we sort of forget, when we forget the blessings that God has given us. When we forget that he has given us blessings. There is a work that he's doing in our lives. That's when we can find ourselves when we start to grumble. The Israelites were complainers. As soon as they were out of Egypt, they began to see what they didn't have rather than the massive miracles and things that they did have, now their freedom. It's easy for us to fall in the mindset of becoming a grumbler. So what do we do? What do we do if we find ourselves in that sort of funk? Well, we're all people of God, and we can ask him for help. Jesus Christ was at all points tempted, and there was some things that he, in our world, we could say he had some things to grumble about. Let's go to, stay in Philippians 2 here. We'll just go back to verse 5. It says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So let you put on this mind as well that Jesus had, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. We have a fantastic example of someone who was humble and who did something that was very hard, that was not for himself, We never read that, he's like, I got to save all these humans, that backstabbing humans, that, sinning all the time. Jesus Christ was humble. He was, this is the same being that, shaped the universe that we see around us. This is the same being that lifted Adam out of the dirt and breathed life into him. We never see him grumble. In fact, he does have something that he wants to make a request to God at one point in his life. Let's go to Luke 22. Luke 22. He does at one point come to God the Father with a request. Luke 22. Now, rather than having an attitude, or rather than having, doubt or, feelings that were not, he took his request and he took it to the person who could do something about it. Luke 22:41, and he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw away, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Jesus Christ was about to sacrifice himself for all of mankind, for you. He didn't complain, he didn't grumble, he didn't murmur, and when he did have a request, he took it to the person who could do something, but it was God's will that he would sacrifice for us. He didn't sink to meaningless, fruitless grumbling. He took his request to God. Jesus shows us how to serve without complaining. He shows us how to be humble without complaining. He voluntarily did it because that's who he is and that's who we are becoming. And when we are grumbling complainers, and if we're to be imitators of Jesus, we don't look like him, do we? We don't look like our elder brother. So ask yourself, am I a complainer? Do I grumble? Am I guilty of murmuring? If so, there's a power that God has given us to overcome. Yield to that spirit. Look to our elder brother, Jesus Christ, and seek to imitate him. Let's not be a people who grumble and gripe, but let's be an example to the world. Let's be an example of peace and contentment.